That I've been consulting with law enforcement, sheriff's counties, Fortune 50s. Just did a consultation with the company of the youngest 2 billionaires ever, because everybody wants threat intelligence because it's a cool buzzword. So, first thing, if you get told you need to stand up threat intelligence, you need to understand that threat intelligence runs the full spectrum of a company. It is a true enterprise program, and it should not live in your InfoSec department, and I'll explain why. How many of you are part of military? Got a couple hands in here. All right, so in the military, and I'm going to use military as an example so that you can understand what you should be doing in the civilian sector. So in the military, we have something called an S1 shop. That equates to human resources in the civilian world. We have something called an S2 shop. That is your intelligence arm, right? We have something called S3, which equates to your operations. We have something called S4, which is logistics. And then we have, depending on the echelon, we'll have some 5 shops. They do super secret squirrel stuff. And then we have S6, which is your IT department. So no matter what the organizational structure is, you have a head of that organization. In the civilian world, it's a CEO, okay? That CEO needs to make business decisions. If you want to have a threat intelligence program that is successful, you must be value added to the CEO. What the CEO needs from you is to make a well-informed decision. So somebody give me an example of what a threat to a business is. Raise a hand. Okay, malicious insider.
Loss of intellectual property.
Loss of intellectual property. Loss of PCI. Loss of life. We're getting bigger. Think bigger now. Get out of your ones and zeros. What's a threat to a business? Competition. Natural hazards. Reputation. How many of these are unique to just your information security team? None. This is the first indicator why threat intelligence is not an information security function. Okay? Now, what if your building were to explode? And I use this as an extreme example here, because the same people that stayed in the corporate building that you were in, you had an abortion clinic on the first floor and you were in the Bible Belt. Would that be a threat to your company? 100%. How many information security people are monitoring threats to the abortion company on the first floor when your company is on the 7th? None. That is why this is a threat intelligence function, and it does not belong to your information security department. Okay? How many people could ever assume that a fire drill or a bomb scare to clear a building would be used to access your network remotely? How many of your information security departments have thought about that potential kind of a threat and actually have a plan in place of what to do if they have to clear the building immediately? Not very many, because what's your information security team worried about? Technical assets, the network and the hosts and nodes that reside on them. Usually, to some degree, the data that resides on them, right? But what are they looking for? They're looking for the 50-meter target. They're looking for the whack-a-mole threat. They're looking for the IOC, the malware. Well, what's the C in IOC stand for? So what happened already? Somebody already got popped, right? And that's the only way you're learning your lesson. If you want to have true threat intelligence, you have to think about what could be the threat before it comes, so you can go out and find indicators of attack, not an indicator of compromise. All right, I didn't hear anybody, I might have heard somebody mention your company good name. Did I hear somebody say good name, company good name, your brand? How many of you actually go out and look to see or have alerts, use tools like domain tools for brand monitoring, and go out and look for somebody that registers a domain that has the sequence of characters that match your company name anywhere in that domain? A few people do. How many of you actually share that information with marketing and legal? 2. That's more hands than I usually get. Okay? So I'll tell you, I worked for a company for a little while, still do stuff with them all the time, and I helped with Red Hat for a little while. I went to Red Hat and I said, hey guys, have you guys taken any look at potential phishing for your customers or people trying to get people inside the company, setting up sites for blogs and chats that are not threatening? They're not attacking, they're not malicious, they're not tripping sensors on your network, they're not phishing your people. But how many of you look at anything that's been set up that has your company name in the name somewhere of that domain? Well, why would we care about somebody who's not attacking us, not phishing our customers, but is helping support our good name, right? We're an open source community. Ever heard of oversharing? How many of you could read a job description and tell me what technology a company uses? Have you guys ever asked your marketing and HR department if they have the people that they're using when they post job descriptions to capture the IP addresses of people reading the job descriptions but not applying? Wouldn't that be some awesome threat intelligence to give you a hint at who might be reconning your technical capabilities? Is this something that is unique to the Information Security Department? Is it starting to make sense why threat intelligence is not an information security only function? Now, if you are in the information security team, you are two things. One, you are a consumer of threat intelligence, but you are also a contributor and a creator of threat data. So because you're in information security and they're in threat intelligence, if you are in threat intelligence, do not get the big head. You are in a customer service role. You have people that need you and you have products that you need to produce for them. But if you are in information security, you need to be sharing up as well, because guess what you might help drive? Intelligence requirements. Your threat intelligence team, they may be badasses on the internet, they may be badasses at OSINT and Recon and red teaming, but guess what? We can't boil the ocean either. If we don't know where possible problems lie, and we don't know of some of the daily battles that you're fighting, right, and the fires that you're fighting, we don't know where to go look for information or what to be searching for, right? We just named a whole bunch of threats out here. I was a one-man show for a threat intelligence team for a multi-billion-dollar company. Do you think I have enough time? I have a husband, I'd like to sleep, I'd like to eat, okay? I can't chase all the boogeymen on the internet. So for a threat intelligence team, that's number one, what you need. If somebody wants to hire you for threat intelligence, you say, what are your intelligence requirements? Oh, well, we want to know about anybody who's going to harm us. My 5-year-old's a threat to you. Let them loose in your data center for 5 minutes. I promise that 5-year-old is a persistent threat, right? Okay, so they need to at least know what their intelligence requirements are. So if you get asked to stand up a threat intelligence team, you need to know, what are my intelligence requirements? What question am I trying to answer? Okay, well, next year we would like to buy property, or we want to set up an office in Berlin. We want to open up a new global office overseas. Okay, let's go do a site assessment. Let's see who's in the building. Let's see who's within certain ranges of these things. Okay, let's find out what type of security the facility owners have. Let's talk about badge readers, right? Let's talk about Wi-Fi. Let's talk about building padding. Let's talk about low frequency, high frequency badge readers. Let's talk about door access. Let's talk about cameras. Let's talk about physical footprint. Who did I just mention? What team is that? And physical security. How often do physical security and InfoSec teams share? Right. So, is threat intelligence InfoSec only or FISEC only? So now for all of you who've been in corporate America, everybody heard of a role called Chief Security Officer? Or CISO? Who might need to be in charge of your threat intelligence team? Maybe we need to be higher up at that level, enterprise level, as to who we're reporting to, because who does he attend meetings with? CSO, marketing, HR, FISEC, right? So The things I can share with you about threat intelligence is, even though we're all digital people, right? We've got to get our heads out of ones and zeros and stop looking at the 50-meter target. Threat intelligence is a strategic investment. If somebody tells you, I want to stand up a threat intelligence team, and we need to blog and we need to share information to our customers and be value added, you are in the wrong role. That is not threat intelligence. How many of you in here have children? How many of you guys have ever had your kids ever gotten sick? Okay, and God forbid, don't raise your hand, maybe a child needed surgery. Okay? If you came to my office as a doctor and I didn't have a white coat, I didn't have an x-ray film board, I didn't have alcohol swabs, I didn't have a thermometer or one of the little doohickeys where I take your blood pressure, and you brought your kid into me, and I'm not doing any immediate diagnostics on you, and I talk to you and I'm like, yeah, sure, I've super glued some stitches shut and put on a few Band-Aids and a tourniquet. I can absolutely do surgery on your kid. Would you let me do surgery on your child? Right? So if I am your customer and I'm coming to you and you want to convince me that you can do threat intelligence for me, and then I ask you to show me how you do it, would you expect your customer to buy threat intelligence services from you if you can't even do it in-house yet? So there's your first pushback. When somebody tells you they want you to do threat intelligence and give something to your customer, boss, we don't even do it in here. How are we going to do it for somebody else? Right? I don't need my ass flapping in the wind. Let's not make us a liability. Let's not, we need to think this out. We need to plan it. Now, and I'm not here for self-promotion. I'm really just trying to jump in and fill the gap. I have a blog called osint.fail. Okay? I talk a lot about threat intelligence on there. And I have one that's the 3 myths of threat intelligence that I just put out. Feel free to use it and butcher it. Okay? But if you guys are hearing this buzzword and you're in information security, I promise you, sooner or later, you are going to be asked to start doing threat intelligence, and you need to be the guy in the room that says, I'm not sure this is our role, or it needs to be buried down at our level. Because what's going to happen is you're going to get stuck looking at the immediate threats, the 50-meter targets, in ones and zeros. Anything that would appear on a Network Plus or a CCNA exam, that's all you're going to care about, and you have 1/10 of the pie. Okay? You had a hand for a question.
Yes. Well, I'm at a career inflection point.
Okay.
Where I'm either going to go back to my day job as a security person, or try to get a seat at the table for that threat intelligence role, where I already know, basically how the IT threats work. I don't know the marketing threats. I don't know the business threats, the strategic threats that are going on. I know these discussions are happening between the CEOs and the CFOs and the product leads and things like that. I need to get a seat at that table.
So I would tell you the best way to use business speak that they understand about threat intelligence is what this gentleman said here, risk.
Risk.
That's the word they understand.
It does risk. I think I can contribute to that.
Okay.
But I need to demonstrate that IT, InfoSec risk, needs to be in their calculation when they go in and acquire the next company.
Okay.
Or build the next building.
So, and God,
the next product.
forgive me for using this, but how many of you have CISSPs? Okay, how many of you guys remember the formula, risk equals threat times vulnerability, okay? Then you start calculating in likelihoods and probabilities, and those 2 words mean different things to statisticians. But, so if you want to get in there and they're doing risk calculations or whatever, start talking with them and say, hey, what is your risk model? What is your risk formula, okay? If they understand vulnerability management, okay, I think I have a blog out there that might help you where I say this is how you can score a threat. Use this score with a CVE score to get the holistic risk/threat score of this vulnerability. Because you can take a low, and if you're InfoSec people, you know you have these 5 types of actors attacking you regularly, or you face these 5 types of threats, you can go in and evaluate that threat actor so that you use the same consistent, repeatable process every single time, and you give them a score of what type of threat they pose to you. And oh, by the way, you're never truly zero threat. There's no such thing, okay? But you take that and then you say, okay, well, we have these vulnerabilities over here, right? This is technical risk. So we are exposed because we are putting intellectual property at risk. We are putting assets at risk. We may be putting physical people at risk, right? So you talk to the legal department. The legal department hated me and loved me at the same time, right? When I did my job, I made work for other people, okay? The patching team, the product security team, they could not ignore when I had documented that there was an exploit out there for a technical risk. The physical security team could not ignore once I put it in writing that there was a ticket for a threat against a badge reader. The finance team couldn't ignore me when I had said, hey, here's this problem over here. Okay? So you have to find the other areas where they're talking about risk so that you can start to talk about threats exploiting them, whether it's a person, somebody else in a building that you own, a neighbor in the building. So that's how you want to get, if you want to pivot, look at concepts of governance, risk, and compliance, right? Look at how red teams are going to do a penetration test, and you do it in reverse. If they have to do a physical pen test on a building, how do they get in? There's where you're looking at threats for threat actors, because the red team is supposed to be the bad guy. Viz is an amazing example of that. If you know him, Jason Street, amazing example. They're gonna get in, right? So look at how they're doing things and the reports they're putting out. Take that model and go back and say, how would somebody do this to us? Does that help?
Yeah.
Any other question? Yes, sir.
Hey, so when you talk about it not being a security thing itself, I think insider threats are like an example of that.
Okay.
Because people, like, you don't even do that, right? Like, people who are in bad circumstances.
So I will tell you what happens with insider threat. People pay attention to that in cycles about every 5 years. Okay? Like, seriously, it's ebbs and flows. Go back and just look at news posts. Insider threat is something that's always a threat. You think you've got it down, right? So if you want to talk about threats of that, you need to start talking to your HR team, right? Say about, okay, how are we doing job descriptions? How are we vetting people in key roles, right? It's illegal, supposedly, in some countries to do background checks on people where you actually go to do stuff like that. But guess what the threat intelligence team can do? The threat intelligence team can assess risk that critical hires pose to the corporation.
So I'm thinking of monitoring. So, for instance, an employee who maybe is on a performance improvement plan might be more of a risk for insider threat.
So unless you have an intelligence requirement that says they are concerned about this person, you are at a strategic enterprise level. The threat intelligence team, unless asked by the HR team, right? And this is where you start sharing, right? When if say they have, I don't know, maybe they're on a development team, a DevOps team, right? They need to be having that conversation up to HR. HR comes over to the CISO and says, hey, we have a potential insider threat, or we have some concern about this person, right? But again, this goes back to, should you be working on it? Maybe. It depends. Okay, are you a startup company that has 200 people, or are you a multi-billion-dollar company that has 200,000 people? Right? If you're a startup company with 200 people and they're smart enough, they want to have a threat intelligence team in a startup, amazing. Yay, kudos. I don't think it's happening. But yes, you may have time, scope, and availability, because if you're hunting something, you can't be hunting and developing and analyzing A and B and C and D and E. So is insider threat a problem? Yes. Is it an InfoSec problem only? No. Is it an HR problem only? No. Could the threat intelligence team augment or help? Yes. Would you normally No, because you're typically at a strategic level. Does that make sense? That doesn't mean that you can't or you won't, right? But if you think you have like a faction inside the company that's going to try to overthrow it or steal a bunch of stuff and walk out, okay, that might be something more. A single individual, it's going to depend upon what that individual's role is, whether or not the threat intelligence team would be concerned about that. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, so we have like control upon control about privileged access and monitoring EBAs and blah, 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 that like nobody's addressing, like, hey, what when EBAs just pissed off and so I guess to that point, yes, we can be leaders and everybody else is stepping up. But I think specifically, as you've mentioned, HR is kind of particularly at least willing, in my experience, to share information with that employees.
So
have you had any luck?
Well, yes and no. So when in talking with HR teams, when they start to understand that, what they'll typically do is they'll say, okay, threat intel team, you can ask for demographic data without having individuals' names. I'll give you an example. If I worked in the Ukraine, I might want demographic data about who's pro-Western or who's not, who's pro-Russia and who's not, right? Nationality, city of origin and birth, regional loyalties, right? The HR can give me information about these groups of people, right? Or you guys could proactively go out, figure out who's targeting your thing, and then see who in your company is dumb enough to participate in these gatherings and these politically driven meetings, and then you could say, hey, here's a problem. You at the threat intel team level probably would not be getting names of individual people to be doing investigations on, and you wouldn't want to. Yes, sir.
I just want to follow up on that. I would never have threat intelligence looking at that anyways. I mean, if you have an incident response team, it could go legal, especially when you're dealing with that, so it needs to be defensible when you take it to court.
Right.
And your incident response team, and if you have a threat team like we do, a threat hunting team, they would normally have that relationship with HR. I brought them donuts in the door, and
like, seriously. He's right. You have to. So as the threat intelligence, part of it is you have to build relationships with the other departments in your company because they don't understand what you can do to help them. And when you're saying, hey, I'm here to reduce our risk and help you with these things, I literally sent out emails to managers and key roles and said, hey, I'm the new threat intel Bubba, and I'm here to help. My job is to hunt threats and help us avoid them, right? Not respond to them. So is there anything you're concerned about? My FISEC team said, hey, we're kind of concerned about any attacks or weaknesses in this product. Well, guess what? The product didn't necessarily have a problem. So I asked them, I said, okay, well, tell me who the company is, who your sales rep is, and all this other stuff. I looked into the sales rep and found out some really sketchy stuff that I don't think his employer knew. And I was like, hey, I might not deal with that sales rep, right? So go down, sent it over to the marketing department. Hey, I'm here. I talked to them. What kind of business intelligence do you guys use? What are you doing from a brand monitoring, this, that, and the other? Found out what they were doing. And I'm like, okay, so what kinds of things, if they stumble across my desk while I'm out filtering the shit on the internet, would you like me to toss over the fence to you if I find them? And they'll tell me, hey, we'd like to know about these 5 things if you find out anything about that. Cool, not a problem. So I started finding out what everybody else might be interested in knowing that they didn't have enough cycles to process or dig into, but it's been on their board, right? Brought that back to my boss, and I said, well, here's a list of potential priority intelligence requirements. Now you tell me which ones matter to the company and which ones matter to the CEO, which ones tie to our mission, vision, and our quarterly or annual goals for the year. You tell me which ones of these I need to work on. Because when I said priority intelligence requirement to my boss, he said, oh, what? Okay? I had another hand over here, and I got 2 minutes. All right, well, did anybody learn anything today?
Yes.
Okay. I am always available for questions. My DMs stay open. I'm at GRC_ninja. My blog is osint.fail. Feel free to DM me if you guys have any questions. Thanks for staying.
Let's jump on it.
And sincere thank you to Tazz for stepping up last minute, doing this dry without slides. So let's see, another round of applause for her, please.